Good morning. My name is Rabbi Sruli Fried. I'm a member of Lifeline's Project Chai Crisis Intervention Team. And we're here to address how to speak to children about this incredible, enormous tragedy that has befallen the entire Klal Yisrael, the tragedy of the 7 children that passed away last night in Flatbush from the Sassoon family. The enormity of the tragedy is so difficult for us as adults, as parents, to comprehend and to grasp. Yet we are asked at this time to be there for our children, to somehow talk to our children, somehow reassure them, and as parents to be there to look out for any signs that they are having a difficult time with it. The most important thing, and that's what we're here to address, is that children at such a time need to hear from us, as opposed to hearing from the news, as opposed to hearing from friends, from neighbors, kids their other age. You want to make sure that they're hearing it from the parents, from those people that they love, from those people that they trust most. Realize that children, under the most difficult of circumstances, are so resilient. Your children are going to be okay. Children can handle difficult information. Children are resilient. But we're here to give you a few pointers, to give you some guidance on how to best get them through this most difficult of times. Before we even start talking to children, we need to realize that we can't project our feelings onto our children. If we're having a difficult time with it, which I'm sure we all are, make sure to speak to friends, make sure to speak to a rabbi, a rav, reach out to those people that you love, that are there for support for you before speaking to your children. It's okay to cry, to be sad with your children. And as we'll speak a bit later, it even normalizes to them to say it's okay to cry, it's okay to be sad. But we need to make sure that we're in control. We need to make sure that our children feel reassured by us. We need to make sure that we are the ones that are reassuring them, as opposed to them looking to us and seeing our reactions and getting even more scared. Some of the 6 key pointers that we need to look out for before we even start speaking to children is obviously the age of your child, the age of children. Every age is different developmentally in terms of how much information you give them and in terms of how they cope. Their proximity to the actual tragedy. So for example, if you are a neighbor, you're closer to the tragedy. If your child is in the class with one of the children. Trauma, as we always say, is like throwing a pond into the river, and it's the concentric circles that come out of that pebble that was thrown into the water. The closer you are to the point of impact, obviously the impact will be so much different. Personality, you need to know the personality of your child and how they generally deal with things and how they generally cope. We need to look out to see if there were prior issues beforehand that your child was dealing with. Have they recently dealt with experienced prior loss? Have they dealt with loss in their family and immediate family? These are important things, and important things that you need to look out to before you even start speaking to your child. Another important three weeks, that's when they're going to react, and that's when they're going to need you most at that time. So be ready for them when they need you most, as opposed to when you feel that you need to deal with it with them because you're the one that's having a difficult time now. What do you say? What don't you say? What do you tell children? Obviously, the most important thing is make sure to be factual. Make sure to be truthful. Your children need to trust you now, and they'll only trust you if they feel you're absolutely being open and honest with them. Age appropriate. What you're telling your 6-year-old is not what you're telling your adolescent child. You have to give age appropriate information. Don't give gory details. Make sure you protect them from excessive watching the news or looking on all the websites. There's no need for that. Rather, they need to hear from you. You could give them the age appropriate details. You could correct the misinformation that they're hearing from other children. It's important that all this is coming from you, from the parent that they love most and they trust most. What do you tell children? Where are they now? Where are these 7 beautiful children now? You tell children that they are in Shemayim, they are with Hashem, they are with God, they are in heaven, they're not in pain, they're not suffering, but we are so sad, we are devastated because we miss them so much, and we are sad and devastated because we see the pain and suffering that their families and friends are going through. Some of the emotional reactions that children go through when dealing with such an enormous tragedy. As we said earlier, obviously all reactions and all emotions are okay. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be crying. It's okay to be scared. It's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. There are 4 key pointers that I want you to keep in mind when dealing with your children's emotions at such a time. The first thing is ventilate. Allow them to ventilate. Allow them to express their emotional feelings. Give them that opportunity. Find those teachable moments where they can express themselves. The second thing is validate those feelings. Your feelings of anger, your feelings of sadness, of being scared, make sure to validate them. You're not making them more scared by validating your child's feelings. Rather, you're telling them it's okay to feel this way. The third thing is model appropriate reactions. If your child is crying, if your child is sad, if your child is scared, say that when you heard about it on Shabbos, when you heard about it, you were devastated, you broke down crying, you were scared. Children look up to you to see what your reactions are, and if you model appropriate reactions, they'll say it's okay to feel this way, it's normal to feel this way. And the fourth and final step is to reassure them. That once you validated their feelings, once you allow them to ventilate their feelings, and you model the appropriate reactions, we need to get to that 4th step, which is to reassure them. How do we reassure children at such a difficult time when the tragedy is so enormous? You need to stress the rarity of it. You need to stress how rare this is. This is something that almost never, ever happens. Sadly, it happened to someone we know, someone we love, someone that's a member of our community, and therefore we're devastated. But we go to sleep every night, and we wake up every morning, and the world is a safe, secure place, and this is something that almost never, ever happens. That's such an important thing to stress again and again with children. You want to tell them that they're safe, that mommy and daddy are here for you. We are going to get through this together as a family. And this is something that almost never happens. And it's okay to speak about fire safety and what fire safety things you have in place at this time to make sure that they feel safe and secure at such a time. One of the common questions that we get, and when fielding all the phone calls last night on our 24-hour hotline, this was the common question that parents were asking, especially with adolescent children, with teenagers, was how can such an enormous tragedy happen? How can this be? How can so many children die? How can one child die such a tragic death, let alone 7 children, such beautiful children? And it's the age-old question of Tzadik V'Ralo and Rasha V'Tovlo. How can such bad things happen to such good people? How can the good suffer so much? And then children and adolescents question themselves, it's okay, why are they asking such questions? Is there something wrong with their emunah? Is there something wrong with their bitachon? And it's important to point out that when Moshe Rabbeinu had one question to ask of Hashem, when Hashem told him you have one question to ask, the question that he asked was, God, please tell me, how can such bad things happen to good people? How can little children suffer like this? And according to one opinion in the Gemara in Brachas Daf Zayin, he didn't get an answer. God did not answer Moshe Rabbeinu. So 2 things. If Moshe Rabbeinu was allowed to ask the question, it's okay to ask the question. The second thing is that if Moshe Rabbeinu didn't get an answer, it's okay to tell children, we don't know. We don't have an answer. If you are open and honest and have open and honest communications with your child, it's okay to tell your child, I don't know on such a question, and they'll trust you even in the most difficult of questions like this one. But one other point about this is that as much as they're asking a theological question, as much as they're asking an hashkafa question, it's important to realize that ultimately, it's an emotional one. I remember quite a few years ago, I was dealing with a terrible tragedy in Teaneck, New Jersey, where I needed to go in after a devastating fire, and a few children passed away. It was a devastating tragedy. And I was speaking to the teenage boys of the friends of one of the boys that passed away. And this is the question they were asking: how could this happen? How did God allow this? And every answer that I was giving fell on deaf ears. But the answer is that ultimately there is no answer, because emotionally it's devastating. And emotionally we sit and cry and we're sad, and no answer can bring them back. And we need to realize and understand that when our children are asking this question, ultimately it's not a hashkafa question, but ultimately it's an emotional one that requires an emotional response. And finally, I want to finish off with one quick thought. And David HaMelech, King David in Tehillim, cries out in the most difficult of times. He cries out to God and says, Keli, Keli, lama azaftani. Oh God, why have you forsaken me? How could have you done this to me? Why am I in so much pain? Why is there so much suffering? And Reb Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, the great Rabbi Hirsch, says in his classic play on words, he says, David HaMelech, King David, did not ask lama, why? He asked lema, for what purpose? What do you want me to do with this suffering? What do you want me to do with this pain? How can I take this enormous tragedy and pain and suffering and put it into something proactive? And it's not only an incredible thought in hashkafa, but it's one that can be so helpful psychologically for our children. Sometimes in such tragedy, it's important to point out to children, take this tragedy, take this pain, take this suffering, and let's do something proactive about it. Let's do something positive about it. Let's do things, Ili Nishmas, the 7 children. Let's take upon ourselves a small, achievable thing. Let's learn fire safety. Let's do something lema. Let's take this pain, let's take this suffering, and do something proactive about it. I've addressed just briefly a few of the main points of how to talk to your children. The Chai Lifeline has a team of therapists from Project Chai that are available 24 hours a day to answer any questions you have about our children. The number to call is 855-3-CRISIS. 855-3-CRISIS. And may we only share in good and happy times together.